assignments. First, thanks very much for your consistently good work, especially on these capstone assignments. So all of you have feedback on your capstone 2 assignment, your literature review, and I'm working on your homework assignment from last week. But remember, the capstones 1 and 2 build into the final research proposal that will be due toward the end of our class. And this week you will build the methods section for capstone 3, that final portion of your research proposal. So let's talk a little bit about the methods section. I realize the way this course is designed that you haven't read the textbook related to methods yet. That comes in chapter 8 for quantitative research and chapter 9 for qualitative research. That's where they discuss how to build your methods section. So I inherited the flow of this class. My apology that for right now, week 5 says for you to focus on reading chapter 6. But really, that's why I've started to make a note in Blackboard saying, if you have time, start reading ahead in chapter 8 and chapter 9, because those chapters will help you build your methods section. Okay, so let's talk about capstone 3, writing your methods section. First of all, the assignment details are uploaded, and I uploaded a lecture on how to create a methods section. So look at the lecture if you have time, but then if you don't watch the video, make sure to scan either chapter 8 or chapter 9, depending on which direction you're headed, either quantitative numeric data collection or qualitative textual data collection. This can change, and it might change, but for now, most of you are pretty sure of which type of data you need to collect. Most of you are interested in collecting numeric data. Maybe 2 of you are considering qualitative or a mixed methods approach. So, the assignment should be pretty straightforward for the Cap 3 project, and that will take, you'll spend most of your time this week building that assignment. One other way to get good examples is to look for the top 1 or 2 articles from your literature review and follow their methods section to learn about language and tone of the writing, and also how they build the different sections of their method portion of the paper. Because often, if they collect survey data, you might want to collect survey data as well. So then you sort of have a template for how you can write the method section related to a survey, or an experiment, or a qualitative interview, or whatever it is, the direction your data collection is heading, most often relates to those top 1 or 2 articles that you keep going back to as you were writing your literature review. So let's talk through the basic components of the method section. Remember, it's kind of a boring section to write. It's kind of bland, but it does 2 really good things for the reader and for your own thinking about your project. It clarifies sort of guidelines or the recipe for your data collection. How will you make sure that the data is good? Who will you get the information from? How will you protect those people to ensure there's minimal risk and maximal benefit? And then what is your plan to actually analyze the data, numbers or text or subjective information, once you get the data? Okay, so the first question is, basically you answer for the reader is, if the reader wanted to replicate it, would they have enough detail so that they could replicate your study and expect to get similar results? Yeah, what's the recipe? The second question is, can they trust the data? And that gets to the question of validity or consistency of data. Did you protect the data and the participants along the way so that the reader can trust your results once they get to that part of the research paper? Okay, so the method section for you in the Cap 3 assignment, the instructions say you should use subheadings, study design, participants, who will you collect data on, then the data collection procedures, and finally the plan for statistical analysis. Now that final section, statistical analysis, I don't expect that to be very specific. It can be generic, and we'll get there in a minute. But let's go back to the top. The study design, remember, that forces you to say, okay, I'm going to either use a quantitative approach to data collection or a qualitative. Some of you might combine the two and use mixed methods, but most of you will pick one or the other, and most of you will pick quantitative numeric designs. Just experience and history says as much. So remember, quantitative, you have two basic choices of designs. Either you want to collect descriptive, otherwise known as survey-based research. You're going to try and grab as much information on the largest group of people through a quick paper and pencil or an electronic survey where you capture their thoughts, feelings, emotions, perceptions, and maybe a little bit lower level, but still numeric measurements of a large sample. That's called a descriptive survey design. The other major one is experimental or observational. This is often the lab-based approach where you're testing for the impact of an intervention or a treatment, an independent variable, on an outcome or dependent variable. So many of you are going to set up an experimental quantitative design. Yeah, so those are the two main designs for quantitative. On qualitative, remember, you have many more choices depending on what about the subjects and their lived experience you want to know and how you're going to use that qualitative data. So you can identify which design you want to use in that first section, and then specifically identify the variables as well. Sometimes they're independent and dependent variables on quantitative research. On qualitative side, you're not really looking at a relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable, but that doesn't mean you don't have variables. They're just not IV, DV. Yeah? The variables are the concepts or the main ideas that you want to interview or observe people about. So you mention what those variables are before moving on into your participants section. So the second subheading is participants, and you want to be careful to identify who are your participants and how did you recruit them, meaning on the quantitative side, did you use a random design process, a random assignment to groups, or did you use some sort of modified random assignment to groups? Most of you will use a modified random assignment, partly because, as you learned last week, the random assignment of people from the larger population is difficult to accomplish. We don't have access to the entire population of people that we want to say something about. But sometimes, remember, you just want to say something and collect numeric data on a smaller sample of people or a smaller population. Maybe I'm interested in strength training in volleyball players, college volleyball players in Southern California. Maybe that's who I'm interested in because there's a unique facet of volleyball in Southern California, which there is, and there are unique training methods. And so then if my population is Southern California volleyball players, then my random sample looks quite different, right? It's smaller, and I can be more strategic in pulling, let's say, from the Inland Empire, which is, for those who don't live in the area, Riverside and San Bernardino counties where CBU is. What I mean is, not all of you will choose purely random samples from a larger population because your population is smaller. It's more narrow by design because you're interested in a smaller group of people. So then you would be more strategic at how you draw that sample from that group of people. Talk about that. How will you do that? How will you get access? And then how will you protect their rights? And remember the human subjects video that you watched and the training you received. So some of those concepts come back into that section as well. Okay, so how did you include these participants and how did you exclude? On the quantitative and qualitative side, answer the question, why did you choose the people you chose? Remember, on a qualitative approach, you're more purposeful in who you choose because those unique people have a particular experience, lived experience, or social experience or context that you want to capture. That's the whole reason you're doing qualitative research. So you talk about why you chose them. Why are they uniquely qualified to answer your research questions? Okay, so you describe who are they. You protect anonymity, But in qualitative research, you often will say more about the participants than just in the quantitative sense. You might say their age, their height, weight, their previous experience related to some intervention that you might run. And so in Chapter 9, you can find a lot more information about that. So again, I push you ahead to Chapters 8 and Chapters 9 to help guide you through writing this method section. Okay, data collection procedures. This is where you talk about what are your data collection instruments on the quantitative or qualitative side, and how do you know they're good instruments? So quantitative research, if you're doing a survey, you'll talk about which survey do you plan to use. I strongly recommend that you do not say that you're going to build your own survey, because if you want to run statistical analyses on this data, then I can almost guarantee that another researcher has developed a survey that measures what you want to measure. Okay, so hopefully in your literature review, you've started to notice specific surveys that you might use in your own research. So list those surveys right there in that part of the method section, and tell me how the researchers know that they are valid and reliable. On the qualitative side, this is where you would talk about how you design your research questions to answer your interview questions, my apology, the interview guide and the questions that you'll ask in order to address your research questions. Or in Chapter 9, we'll deal more with how to do that as well. Okay? Data collection procedures, we talked about data collection instrument. How do you know you'll get good data? And then any procedures that are unique. So on the experimental side, talk through what standardized procedures you will use to collect your data. Remember, consistency and objectivity are key in quantitative experiments. So talk through how you're going to collect data from those participants. Okay, finally, statistical analysis. Be very brief. It's okay. A couple of sentences for now. We'll develop that in the next 2 weeks. But for this week, this will be the shortest section. You can look ahead into my video, or you can also look ahead to Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 to find the language that you use for quantitative and qualitative analysis. All right, so I went a little long, but hopefully I wanted to give more information to you because, as I say, we didn't assign you the textbook reading related to the method section, and yet you're going to be creating your method section this week. So I'm here to help. Please reach out as you start reading this information and as you start drafting a method section. What else? A couple more things. Remember to look ahead in Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. They provide really good guides and checklists and examples of different parts of the method section.